Hey everybody, I'm back with a new movie review, and this one is the sequel to Meet the Parents, which I just reviewed, which should be up on my YouTube channel. So please follow me in the links in the description below, as well as you want to further support the channel. Please check out my Patreon. The links are in the description below. So yeah, 4 years after the events of Meet the Parents, now that Pam and Greg are engaged, now it's time for, you know, uh, uh, flipping the script essentially, where Pam and her folks meeting where Greg comes from. But before we continue, it's once again directed by Jay Roach, who directed the first film. Ben Stiller, Robert De Niro, Blythe Danner, and Terry Palo reprised their roles as Jack, Greg, Dina, and Pam. And newcomers is Dustin Hoffman and Barbara Streisand as Bernie and Roz Focker, the parents of Greg. Um, so now I liked how this movie begins because it's kind of like flipping the script a little bit, where how Meet the Parents start off, where things seem to certain mishaps to befall Greg in the early onset of the film, trying to set the tone of like, wow, this dude's got is gonna be in for it for most of this film with all these pitfalls happening. Here, it's the way it's set up is like, no, things are tending to work out for Greg. I was like, oh wow, you're putting your luggage, well, I can take it and I can set it anywhere you want to. It's not really big deal, really. And it's, the stewardess is like, oh no, it's fine. I'll put it in the captain's quarters. Oh, thanks. And it's all like everything is working out perfectly fine for Greg when they go back to Oyster Bay to meet up with Pam's parents. Everything seems to be everybody seems to be on good terms now. Uh, uh, Jack and Dina are looking after their first grandchild of Debbie and Dr. Bob. And the it's kind of weird, but the baby is Jack Jr. or Little Jack, which, because of Jack's patriarchal influence, convinced Debbie to convince Dr. Bob to name their first kid after him, which is very overbearing, but it is what it is. So we see like how Jack is teaching little Jack, I guess like they call the Ferber method in terms of like parenting, which I guess at that time would have been the cutting edge teaching. Was like, as a brief rundown, like a Ferber method is a technique invented by Richard Ferber to solve infant sleep problems. It involves sleep training, self-soothe by allowing the child to cry for a predetermined amount of time at intervals before receiving external comfort, which is seemingly, they kind of leave out that part because Jack wants to have little Jack, like try the Ferber method, like just you know self-soothe, like don't constantly come to coddle the baby or the infant in this case, but as described more specifically, they neglect to put input into the film because that's part of the comedy, I guess. Whereas, like, yeah, you gotta still come back at intervals. You don't know what's going on with a kid if you just like let it cry out. This might becomes like a issue. Uh, but then also teaching the young infant about sign languages, so that way, you know, as Jax put it, which is kind of common knowledge, that infants and young kids soak up information like a sponge. So you learn this stuff now, it becomes second nature when he gets older. Showing like when the baby's hungry, does the sign language like I'm hungry kind of thing, which is kind of cool. So instead of taking a flight out to meet Greg's parents, Jack ends up renting an RV and drive down there. Get like a half a day sooner to meet them, because Jack desperately wants to know, like, okay, does Greg comes from good stock? He's trying to, like, once again, super hyper focused on, like, okay, we need, as he puts it, like, I don't want a chink in my chain, because he has this circle of trust kind of situation. And he is, very, I hate to use this word, but it kind of perfectly describes the situation where it's like, very controlling of a lot of aspects. I mean, you kind of bulldoze your way into your other daughter's life where, kind of making her name after, or influenced her to name her first son after him. But then you kind of like, I don't know, you can't seem to let go of the reins a bit in many aspects, like having like a makeshift breast thing, where you have one side of the boob pocket to hold the milk bottle, while the other one, as Pam put, is very weird, where you have scientists, or doctors or whatever, simulate or make a rubber cast of the exact left breast of your daughter, so that way Jack can like still have that connection when she's not around, kind of thing. The whole entire thing is very weird, as as he'll get addressed about it later on, which is kind of like this. There's got to be some psychological thing going on with Jack, where it's like, dude, like, what's up? Because this entire thing, nobody does this. And of course, if this kind of stuff was played out today, it'll be like all the rage, and like certain females or certain super leftists will like, oh yeah, like it's perfectly normal to have a man with a breast because I want to feel connected as a my inner woman. And like parents like, no, this whole freaking thing is entirely weird. It's very weird. Like who does that? But anyway, they go to Miami, Florida, to meet with Greg's parents, and to like Dina and Jack's knowledge, Greg's parents the father is like a retired lawyer while the mom is a doctor. And it's like, oh wow, this comes from good stock. But she's not just a doctor. She's a sex therapist for elderly people. And then the father has been like a lawyer for a very long time because he decided to become like a stay-at-home dad for his son many years ago, but I guess haven't returned to the practice since. And they, upon arrival, they come to learn that their parents are very kind of hippy dippy new age type of lifestyle, and their parenting skills are very polar opposite from what Jack would have taught his kids. And this where like the comedy ensues, where those two facets bump heads, where they while Greg is hiding because he's trying to call his folks to like, hey, like, to forewarn them about Jack and all this other stuff going on with him. And it's like, kudos for trying to, make sure he cover his bases, because he's hiding all these sexual looking objects, because they're very free with their bodies and all this other crap. Don't, bother to hide this kind of stuff. But I'm thinking to myself, okay, after the weekend with the situation from the last film, at no point along between then and now you called your folks and tell them the entire ordeal, so that way they can have at least the gist of what to expect, so that way they know you're coming. They already, cover their bases ahead of time, and you just calling to double check to make sure everything's copacetic. They should know this, but everybody seems super surprised. And it's like, God. And why didn't they answer? It drives me nuts when nobody answers their freaking phone and they're definitely home. So while the dad's outside doing his little Brazilian dance fighting to get some exercise. I mean, and the mom is, teaching the class, but it's like nobody's answering the phone, but you're both home. That drives me nuts. And the dad is like brushing it off like it's no big deal. And it's like, the whole entire thing is like, they're kind of screwy sometimes to me. But then the parents show off this big shrine, basically, of all of Greg's awards. But isn't the type of awards that you expect. They're not first, second, or even third place awards. Because they love their son so much, and he was like an only child, they pour all that love into him and celebrate any accomplishments he made, whether it's like 6th place or 7th place, because like all that, because according to his dad, all that matters is what's in your heart and what's in your head, and which is cool, where you give him the sense of encouragement and like confidence in himself no matter what he does. But at the same time, it like hinders him. It would hinder him a little bit, because it kind of explains a lot given how meek he kind of acts, because you also haven't give him the confidence in other aspects of his life, where, as I mentioned in the previous review of Meet the Parents, he doesn't seem to bother to stand up for himself, where he seems kind of bombarded from all sides, where he just doesn't stand his ground a little bit. Because it makes it seem like, oh, well, I can tell that while he was probably growing up in middle school and high school, he probably got picked on a lot to see how he, you know, is when it comes to like other people when like in the other people, the future in-laws and what have you are kind of like attacking him from all sides and he's kind of taking it. It just seems like, yeah, like you probably not fail, but you didn't exactly do your due diligence in all aspects that could help your kid in the long run. And of course, you see Jack, where he comes from like a completely different parent style, where it's like, competition bodes well for a kid, showing like, yeah, there are winners and losers in life, and you gotta be able to try harder. But that, has a drawback too. Whereas, uh, you like, sure, in life there's winners and losers, sure, makes all the sense in the world. That's how a lot of people, a lot of nations, a lot of teams, strive off that kind of stuff. You fail, you come back stronger next time around. You learn from your mistakes and all that other stuff. But you don't want them to feel like a worthless piece of crap because they have to lose on occasion. They can't always win because that's not how life works. You can't always win. But those are the classic kind of styles. And then, of course, when Roz sees the whole boob mechanic thing Jack has, she points out, you want to avoid confusion by strapping a boob on a man. And as I heard that line, it's like, woof, boy. If she heard that little line of questioning, if that would have played out today, she would have been canceled because it's still idiotic. It is idiotic. It's like, how are you going to avoid confusion by strapping a boob on a man? So Greg is falling over himself, trying to wrangle his parents. And it's like, okay, you got, just mind your P's and Q's. No hanky panky tonight. None of that, because we can hear you trying to have sex all through this freaking house. Is kind of, embarrassing. Like, kind of tone it down a bit. But then the next day, Pam pulls Greg to the side and tells him that she's pregnant. She's about to have a baby. But she wants to keep it a secret from everybody. But of course, Roz, being so intuitive she can just immediately tell. And then she ends up telling Bernie, who ends up telling Dina. So now everybody but Jack knows eventually. But poor decision on Pam's part to just be out with it. Sure, you want to keep it a secret. That's all fine and dandy. But that probably works on most other families, but not someone like yours. Knowing full well you have a CIA dad who's very stick up his butt half the time, and you don't think none of that stuff will come out eventually. You might as well just come clean about it immediately and just, rather than him, because once he starts getting suspicious about stuff, he takes it to the full nine, and it could have all been avoided if he just, said what it is and leave it be. But I guess given how controlling he is, he's going to try to control every aspect of that pregnancy like he probably did with Debbie. So I guess he didn't want to, like, having to go through that rigmarole for yours. But then during a dinner, and this is embarrassing on Roz and Bernie, where they just outwardly embarrassing. Yeah, sure, a lot of parents are embarrassing to their kid every once in a while, but to pull out a it's kind of typical. Like you put out like a family photo album, but you keep the foreskin of your son and you want to show it off, and then you blurt out that your former housekeeper who shows up to help with the dinner for tonight and for the engagement party and stuff like that, and blurt out the fact that you know uh Greg lost his virginity to her, when he was a teenager. And it's like, you didn't need to tell him. There's too much. The word TMI isn't in their vocabulary. And there's certain things that you gotta, like, you just keep it to yourselves. I know you're all free and open about stuff, but it's like you can't seem to read the room and understand there's other people in this world that doesn't share your viewpoints that you got to be mindful about, that you got to, like, okay, tone down your stuff at least some degree. It just seems like, okay, you're just embarrassing just for the sake of being embarrassing. And it's like, come on, like, really, honestly, you can't read the room. It's like you're huggers, but they're not huggers. And it's like, okay, like, come on now. It's like, it's very weird how, like, there's too into themselves. Both of the, parties are just too into themselves to understand that, okay, like, some people are not huggers. Even though I'm a hugger, I'm going to, like, respect the fact that, okay, he just want to shake hands. But once they get to know me and we spend, like, some significant time with each other and what have you, then, like, you can warm up to the hug part if they're feeling, if they're feeling up to it. We don't just, just go full bore with it, because I can't imagine. It's like, okay, TMI, if I wanted my, like, nobody wants to know who they, the specific person they lost their virginity to, especially if they still around, They're just very embarrassing. But then after this whole ordeal with the Burns' cat Jinx, along with the Fokker family's little dog, getting into it, causing, like, the Jinx got to nearly flush the little dog down the RV toilet. Bernie ended up breaking the toilet just to get the dog out. They have to call in Isabella, who was the crap, I just had the word. What is it? Not maid. Former housekeeper. That was the word. Housekeeper. To come in. Like, yeah, this is like, it's too much. But the Isabella has a 15-year-old son who suspiciously kind of looks like Greg, and only Jack is picking up on that with the facial features and everything like that. But he's also like a young mechanic who fixes the toilet. So this kind of raises his antenna. He takes, like, a hair sample from both the kid and Greg to send it to his CIA connects. And now he's thinking, like, okay, he's once again still lying, and it's like, that's a problem to me, because he wants to have this, like, a solid unit of a family. So at the engagement, he injects Greg with some truth serum, and because of that, causes Greg to blurt out that, thinking he is the father of Jorge, which turns out not to be true. But also that Pam is pregnant, which Jack is shocked not only by that fact, but also nobody decided to tell him. And on top of the fact that everybody else knew but him. And the fact that his circle of trust is kind of uprooted because he established the circle of trust, but essentially he just got pushed out and nobody trusts him because he's too freaking controlling and judgmental. So this, the next day it causes like a fight between the two dads after Jack insults Greg when Dina kind of founds the truth serum thing, and Pam had to let him know it's like, because I lied to you because I know you will overreact and everything like that. It's like, all can be avoided. We've just been straight up from the jump because like there's nothing he can do about it. And if he's trying to control, set your foot down, lady. Pam is, she's decent of a person, but she seems to crumble until the last minute when it comes to her father. And it's like, how your father is, to set the boundary. But a fight ensues between Bernie and Jack with, Greg gets caught in a crossfire. Jack goes off, on his RV with little Jack. But Greg and Bernie goes to go find him, but they end up getting pulled over by this idiot trooper. Jack comes to his senses once the CIA connects come back to him, showing this hilarious, baseball card picture of this player who happens to look like Greg too, but with a bushy mustache, who turns out to be the actual father to Jorge. And it come to realize, oh wow, like I'm, as little Jack puts it, an asshole. Which he learns because he ends up watching Scarface and not being paid attention to by Greg fully, while trying to do the whole self-soothing thing, but it doesn't work for Greg. Probably won't work in all aspects to many children. Because who wants to stand by and listen to a baby cry, and it's like without checking on the baby? It's weird. So Greg sees the guy's getting pulled over. He tries to intervene but gets tasered by the trooper, and all three gets hauled into a cell. And one of the judges happens to be a client of Roz who wants them pulled out. And one of the officers there happened to be the Reno 911 black guy there. I don't know his name, but you know who I'm talking about when I describe it. But Greg, asserts a bit of dominance here where he decides, no, I want to stay. We need to stay here for a little bit because we need to have some stuff out. So he lets these guys know that he's about to start his own little circle of trust with his own family, with Pam. And if you guys want to be a part of it, you got to, not bulldoze your influences onto us. We got our own little thing, which Debbie and her man should have established from the jump, but didn't have the kind of cojones in their own right to set some boundaries so Jack can't openly just influence on a whim. So he let them know, it's like I'm going to be the patriarch of my own family. You guys did your own thing, your own way, and I want to do things my way. So They end up having their ceremony. Kevin shows back up because he's a interfaith minister, and it's a little still uncomfortable the fact that this dude keeps popping up in these movies, and it's like so uncomfortable. But of course, it's Owen Wilson. It's like him and Ben Stiller are, comedic duo in their own right. Uh, uh, so they end up getting married in this nice little ceremony. But I kind of wish we got a little bit more, see a little bit more of the other Focker family, because we only hear them about it through Jack's description. But it's, I would like to have seen a little bit more of the family just to gauge more of that side of Greg's familial background, because with Pam we got to see the brother, which never showed up ever again in the third film. Well, I guess we don't need to, but we learned from this film that he's joined the military and whatnot. But anyway, we got to see a brother, the sister, at least a couple of people, but it's just like, well, that's just like the in-laws for Dr. Bob's parents. But it's just like, I wish would, even though Greg's the only child, we kind of wish we would have saw like a little bit more of his side of the family. But yeah, I mean, it's a fun film. This film did exceedingly well. It's still a fun dynamic. The comedy with everybody still top notch. My only criticisms within the story is like more so with like the Focker family, like the parents. It's like, yo, dial it back, because nobody need to know about like your one testicle and how great your son turned out with just the one testicle. And it's like, TMI, people. Not everybody needs, especially the first meeting, nobody needs to know all that stuff. Maybe after a year or two, well within the family dynamic and everything like that, once everything's been solidified and what have you, and the next family gathering, you sharing these stories, by then, yeah, you'd be a little bit more forthcoming about certain things like that, even though it's still kind of gross, but you have probably been within the realm of like, okay, it's acceptable at that point. But yeah, and then of course, Jack being Jack, needed. He's still like, they kind of keep backpedaling this guy, because you think he probably will learn from the previous adventure that stop tightening the reins every time you get into an interaction with Greg. It's always the same rigmarole where it's like you gotta like get your claws into making sure like everybody's steady into these little boxes in your own way, and it's like you learn that lesson to learn to let go, but then again something comes up and you gotta like, oh, I'm worried about this, my family might get a little bit off the rails a little bit, let me like steer them this particular way. I mean, sure, it's like he's the father. He's like the ultimate patriarch. He has to make sure everybody's on track, because he doesn't want like his family getting too, because he's a family man. He's worried about his family, which is understandable. Like he wants to things in a particular way, so that way his family will always have a blueprint. Like, okay, do this in this particular way and you'll be fine. Which I get. Trust me, I get. But you got to allow certain wide berths to allow some free roaming, so they can, your children can execute certain things in their own playbook, building off of what you set. Because your way isn't the only way. And that is a thing where I kind of wish they really stopped backpedaling with this guy. Because it seems like he keeps learning the same lesson in each of these films, and that's probably like the biggest issue. It's not always the same one, but it's in the same vein, and it's like, in general, it's the same lesson where it's like you keep tightening the reins every time you interacting with these people, and it's like you just learned this lesson about like letting these people make their own kind of decisions. Anyway, that is my review of Meet the Fockers, which is still pretty fun. I honestly say, like, Meet the Fockers, out of the trilogy, this one's my actual favorite one. So I've probably seen this movie more times than the other two, but all of them, like, I have some enjoyment out of them. But the second one is my personal favorite. I think this made a lot more money out of the entire trilogy of the films. But at least I think so. Let me double check. I know it made more than Meet the Parents, because this had like a budget of $80 million, and it came out at $522 million. Yeah, and the Little Fockers still made money, but not as much as like the well, not as much as the previous two, but it only made like maybe 10 million less than Meet the Parents, which still made a lot of money, of $330 million at the box office, with a budget of $55 million at the time. So yeah, it's I think Little Fockers is probably the lesser of the three, just slightly, but I still enjoyed it. But but it's still like a fun franchise, honestly. And I'm curious to know if they would ever consider doing like because third times, I'm shocked the third one still was successful, but I think that we pushing their luck if they try to make a fourth one, which I think is a possible rumor, but nothing's confirmed. But I think like they should just leave it, because if they try to do it, but with the kids now, within their 20s or something, it'll be like, okay, how this gonna work is, once again, Jack will be trying to control his grandchildren's lives, like he tried to do with Greg, and it's like it'll become like a beating the same drum over and over again, and like that will be an issue if they try to do that. I don't know if anybody will come to a movie where it's the same thing over and over again. But anyway, that is my thoughts. I will see you guys in a few minutes as I cover the final film of the trilogy, Little Fockers. And I have some thoughts on that. But leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about the trilogy, more specifically this particular film, and how you might relate to this in some capacity. But anyway, I'll see you guys soon. Take care.